And one of the first things I was taught at law school was to speak without fear or favor. And that was my training as a lawyer. And as I began to write this piece, what came to my mind immediately was the case. Here we are talking about needs-based. Of course, very conveniently, it will be labeled as race-based. The case of 18 Indian underclass, including 16 children from the ages of 7 to 18, being forced to live in a 650 square feet flat, low-cost flat in Petaling Jaya. And then the Indian underclass, unlike the Malays, the orang Asli, the Iban, the Kadazan, the Iban, the Murus, they do not have the ancestral village or the ancestral land or the villages as they say, social safety net. Even the Chinese have got 607 Chinese new villages nationwide, and even the foreigner has a village as a social safety net when he goes back. And when we say that this Indian underclass family of 18 has to be given a 10-acre Felda like scheme, like what has been given to the 1.5 million poor Malays, HINDRAF is very quickly labeled as racist. And I would like to, very quickly, I would like to show pictures of what I really mean. Okay, this is a classical case of Darshini, together with 450,000 other Indians who have been denied, do not have different, they've been denied their innate right to birth certificates, to identity cards, and to the citizenship. And in one Malaysia, Tamil school kindergarten looks like this. This is how the Sekolah Tamil school of Teluk Intan looks like, half concrete and half wooden. And then this is the story of the 16 children with their parents who are congested, living in a 650 square feet flat. And in the backdrop, when we talk about Malaysia, we talk about Twin Towers, but this is the shack. It looks more like Somalia to me, but this is truly Malaysia, truly Asia. And then you have an Indian poor who sleeps on the pavement in brickfields. Pray tell me, if we have seen an Orang Asli, a Malay, a Chinese, Iban, Muruk, Kadazan sleeping like this on the roads in the streets of KL, and Bantuan Wang, welfare help, the so desperate Indian underclass, they actually accept 30 ringgit per month. We go for a meal, 30 ringgit a month as welfare help. And then we have a man called Chakraguna being forced to self-immolate himself in order to save his Hindu temple from being demolished. And then we have a Hindu cemetery with just a roof, a zinc roof, and 4 poles for what we have for a Hindu cemetery, and left with no other choice. We have 2 reported cases of one person committing suicide, one person hanging himself, and the other person minum racun, taking poison to kill himself because they have no other way. So that is how desperate the Indian underclass. To us, it is socially engineered by the UMNO-led government over the last 55 years. So they have come about to become what they are today. And day-to-day documentation of this is found in the humanrightspartymalaysia.com. I've given a paper around for members to read. These are just the tip of the iceberg examples and of the unfairness meted out to the Indian underclass in Malaysia. The Indians suffer the worst cases of unfairness in Malaysia, but they get the least attention. And when we point out this level of unfairness, very cleverly we are branded as racist. Now, is this fair? The Collins Oxford Dictionary defines racism as the unfair treatment of people who belong to a different race. There's no way HINDRAF or the Indians have no position to start off with to treat other people differently. And then the other definition is the belief that some races of people are superior, better than others. There's no way we have ever stated that we are superior to deserve being labeled as racist. And then this definition of racism, where a cry against racism in itself becomes racism, this definition only exists in Malaysia. And what we feel is the majority powerful Malay and Chinese, economically and politically powerful Malay and Chinese communities, they do not get sufficient political mileage, so they would not want to talk about these issues. And this is the real reason, and the fairest and surest way to address this unfairness is by, the only way forward as I can see is in the hands of the powerful Malay and Chinese political leaders, NGO leaders, civil society leaders. And what I'm looking at is actually fairness in the Western civil societies. The majority Caucasians, they actually bend backwards. I've lived and worked in London for 5 years. They actually bend backwards to speak up, to lend voice to the minorities, which in Malaysia does not happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we said that they are still Malaysians, and these are our fellow citizens. Why is it that we still have our fellow citizens living in conditions that do not, reflect the aspirations of the country as dictated by the political elite or the corporate elite, who want to project this idea of Malaysia internationally, but it's not reflected on the ground level? So my question to the three of you is this: what would we need? What sort of structural change is required then? I know Chitong would say vote opposition, but what sort of structural change in institutional terms is required for there to be this sort of truly representative politics in the country, whereby Malaysians cannot walk past someone sleeping on the pavement in brickfields without recognizing that is a fellow Malaysian sleeping on the floor? Perhaps,
the question was, what would we need? I think, as I said a short while earlier, going by the civil society standards in the West, I think in Malaysia, the only way the segregation of the Indian underclass can stop. You see, as I mentioned earlier, this Indian underclass is basically socially engineered by the government. They did not ask to be what they are. The only way forward is for the Malay and Chinese powerful political and economic leaders to speak up for these people, which they don't, simply because it's not politically rewarding. So there are no takers for the issues, one. And then number two is, let's say the original objectives of the NEP was eradication of poverty irrespective of race. When 1.5 million 10-acre Felda, Felda, Vista, Pharma, Agropolitan, Kejora, Kedara, Ketengah, Kebubu land projects were given to uplift the poor Malay over and above the poverty level, but the pre-existing Indian plantation workers were not included. They were specifically segregated. Okay? And the most important point, very, very important point, wherever I go, people tend to give the impression that for every poor Malay, there's one poor Chinese, there's one poor Iban, there's one poor Kadazan, there's one poor Pina. I would agree with them because they are also poor Jews. Okay? And that's the impression given. We have to go on a needs basis. Whoever needs attention most, the Indian community does not have political power, neither do they have economic power. They have no voice. So they are basically left to rot. And
this question to Mr. Uthayakumar, Mr. Chintong. Yeah. What I don't understand is that why isn't it politically rewarding for politicians of other races to defend fellow Malaysians of other races? Do you think that's the fault of the politicians or the politics in our country, or is that the fault of the people who can't see beyond the color of the skin of the politicians? I think because as it is now, status quo, it's only reasonable for me, say as an Indian Malaysian, to go to an Indian political representative to gain benefit, to gain help. It wouldn't be practical or seem logical, to put it in more, for lack of better terms, to go to another political representative of another race or another party. So I don't see why that can't happen in our country. And what do you think should be done to put things in order and to make that better in place? Thank you.
Kumar?
Question from Kailash. Why not politically rewarding? My view is we started off on the wrong footing ab initio, from the very beginning. It started off on racial superiority politics. And from the word go, UMNO created constituencies, parliamentary state constituencies, where there are no Indian majority seats. So to me, that's the problem. Of course, we do not need an Indian majority seats if the Malay and Chinese political leaders from both sides of the political spectrum, had they also championed the cause of Indian underclass, we don't need Indian majority seats. So we started off on the wrong footing. So they are powerless. Being politically powerless means that the spillover effect is you become economically powerless. And then out of the 222 parliamentary seats and 576 state assembly seats, there's not one seat which is Indian majority. And then I think to the question from Kailash that Indians should go to an Indian organization, to me, whenever people come to me, I tell them the real power in this country lies in the hands of the Malay and Chinese politically and economically powerful leaders. So we should not go to another Indian because he does not have power. You're wasting your time. Okay, MIC has got zero powers, complete base, and is part of the UMNO racist agenda to put MIC in place. So we have to go to the people who are really in power. And then to the question from Brian, we have got statistics that illiteracy in secondary schools, for us, for the Indian underclass, is a non-starter because 90% of children who attend standard 1 in Tamil schools cannot read and write, simply because they cannot afford to go to kindergarten. Things are that bad. And then fighting for the bottom 40%, as was suggested, if it was really done, the pictures I showed you today would not be in place today. It would not have happened. Thank you. We agree on fairness, justice, meritocracy, and an example that very clearly comes to my mind is UITM, for example. They have 200,000 students only for Malay Muslims, and including they would accept 5% foreign Muslims, never the local Indians and Chinese. So is there fairness here? The answer is obvious. And to the direct contrary, in addition to that, University of Malaya has some 23,000 students, and 60% are supposed to be filled by Malays. Where is 23,000? Where is 200,000 UITM alone? And then affirmative action needs to be needs-based and not race-based. And the example given very frequently, flaunted at many public forums, many discourses and all that, even the UMNO-led government very frequently used this example of Ananda Krishnan being the richest man in the country. I've gone through this many times over and over again, beginning from my days in commenting where I had time on my side to dissect and trisect this proposition. Ananda Krishnan is supposed to be worth 20 billion, and his income tax load, which he pays to the income tax department, is enough to make all 523 Tamil schools fully air-conditioned. But he doesn't do it. See, my view is, of course I do not have the evidence, my view is he is a front for many UMNO people. So with that, the MP said nation waiting. A nation in waiting. Okay, a nation in waiting. We are still waiting. Since the few callers were from Singapore. The few persons opposed to questions were from Singapore. I think Singapore is a very good model for racial equality and equal mobility of opportunities. In Singapore, Singapore Indians do not have the problems as the Indian underclass face in Malaysia. Then coming to foreign labor, I think enough has been said, and I would like to point out the example in Japan. Even the waiters, the garbage collectors, the manual workers are all local. They hardly ever take in foreigners, and the very few foreigners in Japan, they know who they are and where they are and when to get rid of them. And they have a strict foreign workers policy. And the way over to overcome this issue of poverty is offering self-employment and entrepreneurship opportunities to everybody, including to all poor, including the Indian underclass, as a means of upward mobility opportunities. The clearest example I can think of is like the Felda opportunities, and again I have to bring the example of the garbage collection. You see among the locals, you see a fair number of Indians who are the garbage pickers. And earlier the MP said that the truck driver picks up the garbage, he disposes it. He gets the income. He doesn't have to share it with anybody else. But we are still in the nation in waiting. We are still waiting for one Indian garbage picker to be given the contract in the Pakatan States.
Roads, then foresee a corrupted politician. Anytime. In terms of human dignity and human worth. I think this is something that I hope the political parties and the politicians in this country will bear in mind. So, we celebrate Labour Day all the time. I think we really should understand that, these are our fellow Malaysians. I think the prevailing ethos should be no Malaysian should be left behind. No Malaysian should be left behind. And I think the concerns that were raised here, especially by P.Uthayakumar and Zai, I think are very, very important. As the nation develops, in a linear sense, if the gap between the rich and the poor grows longer and longer, then like a caravan, it just gets stretched too far. At one point, will the nation break? The whole point about good governance is you make sure those who are behind catch up. No Malaysian should be left behind. On that note, I'd like to thank P.Uthayakumar, Zainal Anwar, Yu Chin Tong, and the organizers and all of you for being here. And